After the disaster in Paris of the 1900 Games, and the 1904 Games, which for anyone who wasn't American might as well not have happened, it's easy to imagine a world where the Olympic dream disappeared. Its reputation was at an all-time low, and the upcoming Games wouldn't help that very much. An eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 1907 would mean that 08 Games in Italy would get cancelled and moved to London last minute. They'd take 6 months to complete. In comparison, the Paris Games this year are going to take about 3 weeks. Both athletes and organisers at this point were losing interest. But stop. Hey, what's that sound? It's the Intercalated Olympics, and it's here to save the day. It's not exaggerating to say that these Olympics might have saved the Games as we know it. And its dismissal by the IOC today is a kind of tragedy. Between the successful Games in 1896 and 1912, 16 years apart, the main hope for the Olympics came from the Intercalated Games in Athens in 1906. Now, 1906, you might say, that's not an Olympic year, and that's what intercalary means, between the calendar years. So, these intercalated games were a strange idea. They came from an argument held at the very first Olympics as to whether the Games should stay in Athens forever, as actually many of the athletes at the Games wanted, or they should rotate between cities. The latter won because Pierre de Coubertin really wanted them in Paris in 1900. So that's what we have today. And the Greeks tried this 1906 idea to see if they could hold it alternating with the other cities. Now, they would give up on this quite quickly, but that doesn't diminish the importance of these games. The 1906 Games were immensely popular and successful. Unlike 1900 and 04 and 08, they actually kept to their schedule, a very tight schedule. And unlike the previous two Olympics, didn't have to compete with a World Fair at the same time, so the focus could be on the Games. They also brought in loads of great traditions that we still have today. They were the first Olympics where competitors entered by their country rather than independently, which would really streamline the process in future Olympics. More importantly, they were the first Olympics to actually bother having a proper opening ceremony where countries come in one by one behind their flags. They were the first Olympics to have a closing ceremony. They were the first Olympics to have an Olympic village. All of these things are things that we still see today, and they started in 1906. Although a quarter of the athletes were Greek, this is a lot less than at the previous two Games, and over 20 countries were represented, and there was a much more even distribution of medals. There was still only one event for women, but you can only ask for so much. I think the best part of this Olympics, though, is that pistol dueling was an exhibition sport. Pistol dueling. Who came up with that one? So while these games were never repeated, due to expense, upheaval in the Balkans, and eventually the First World War, they're a really interesting experiment, and their importance is pretty hard to deny, which makes it bizarre that the IOC does. They refused to acknowledge these games. In 1948, they decided that actually these games were unofficial 10th anniversary celebrations of the original games. Clearly quite a fib. This will probably be a surprise to the athletes, the organisers, the spectators and the media, all of whom worked under the assumption that these were the proper Olympic Games, particularly as they had the Olympic Committee's blessing at the time. So why bother with this lie? I mean, it seems to be an obsession with the fact that these weren't held in an Olympic year, which is bizarre because other games haven't been held in Olympic years. It's a disrespect to the athletes, particularly as their medals don't get counted towards modern tallies. So all of those golds, silvers and bronzes have been lost. It doesn't even appear on the IOC's website, which is kind of cruel. When you take a look at these early Olympics, there's a recurring theme that the IOC is embarrassed of its early history. It tries to erase sports that it thinks are too weird. It tries to cover up the problems that plagued them. But for me, that's the appeal of these early Olympics. It's why I bothered doing these videos and researching them, because they're so weird and wild and fun. I love that experimental period. And I love how haphazard and chaotic they were. To pretend they didn't happen is just embarrassing, and does a disservice to the people who put them together and the athletes who competed. If you thought that was interesting, please do give it a like and subscribe, as it helps other people find out about it. And why not see one of my other videos about the Olympics?